It's official. Australia is not quite the best place in the world to live. It was just pipped by Norway. The latest United Nations Human Development Index looked at life expectancy, income, average length of schooling among a long list and found that Norway is at number one with a score of 0.94 and Australia comes a very close second with 0.93. This is the top 10 with the United States at number 4 and Germany at 9. Down at the very bottom of the list at 187 is the Democratic Republic of Congo. This survey happily coincides with a new book from journalist Peter Hartcher. The Sweet Spot tells us that life is pretty good here and we should appreciate it. Peter Hartcher joins me now from Canberra. Thanks very much for coming in, Peter. So you wouldn't have been at all surprised with the results of this UN research?
Well, no, but it's nice to have some vindication. Look, the UN Human Development Index has been published for 20 years now. Last year, Australia put in its best performance ever, which was number 2. We've done that again, second to Norway for a second time. Now, of course, that index doesn't include the weather, but I suspect if you put the weather in, we might have to get Norway to step down off the dais. Look, also two other brief indicators I'll mention. One is late last year, the same people put out what they called a hybrid Human Development Index, which adds more measures of living conditions, and that put Australia number 1. Also last year, for the first time, the OECD put out a similar international comparison across a wide range of living measures, and that also put Australia number 1. So we really are, you know, the superpower of living standards.
But we're not doing terribly well in the equality stakes, are we? On the gender equality position, we're 18th in the world, and a lot of people here look at the rich getting richer, and life is still a struggle for a lot of people.
That's absolutely so, and it's so all around the world, of course. This is all a question of relativities. And if you look at the equality measure, if you look at the income inequality measure, for example, Australia the inequality's been getting worse over the last 3 years. But the 8 years before that, Australian inequality was actually narrowing. And whether you look at the last 10 years or the last 20 years, it's true that in Australia the rich have been getting richer, but it's not true that the poor have been getting poorer. Unlike the US picture, for example, in Australia the poor have actually been getting less poor.
So what set us on the path to prosperity?
Well, Australia was in genteel but real relative decline in the 60s, 70s, 80s. What changed the national trajectory was that we got lucky with the last 2 decades of political leadership. We had Hawke Keating and then Howard Costello rejuvenated the national economy. That's made an enormous difference, and we've sort of got spoiled, I guess, with that quality of determined political leader doing difficult, unpopular but important reform work.
So how do you account for the national sense that we're not as happy as we should be, or is it just the human condition to think that things could be better?
I'm sure it's partly the human condition. We all love a bit of a gripe. And, we hang on to our well-honed narratives of misery once we've got them. But also something has changed in the national mood under this minority government nationally. The Gillard-Abbott show has changed the national mood. We saw a poll on that last week from the ANU. There's a lot of dissatisfaction and a general sense that the country's heading in the wrong direction. So that's helped to sour the mood, which of course is at stark contrast with the objective reality of the quality of life in Australia.
Peter Hartcher, thank you.
It's a pleasure.